Hey everyone. Once again, welcome in. We'll just wait for the numbers to build and then we'll get cooking with today's session. We'll give it a couple more minutes, not too much longer. All right. Think we might get cooking on that one. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for the love. Thought I'd dress up this week. Hello, welcome. Tech Month Session 2. First and foremost, again, we'll start today with a quick acknowledgement of country, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land I'm joining on from today, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. Pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. So, Tech Month Session 2. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who tuned in to Session 1. It was fantastic. I know that the presentations from Tom and Graham were both really well received, and I got a lot of positive feedback. So it was great. Obviously, we want to keep the momentum going, and I think at its peak, the last session we had just under 100 people. So it's really good that we're kind of branching out to a wide audience, and hopefully we can get those same numbers today. We have two speakers today. Our first presenter is Ashley O'Sullivan. He's the manager of the Victorian Heritage team at Biosis, and he holds a Bachelor of Arts in Archaeology and Anthropology from James Cook University. He has over a decade of experience in heritage consulting and worked primarily across Victoria and New South Wales with expertise in both Aboriginal and historical heritage management. Delivered numerous large-scale heritage assessments for infrastructure projects, infrastructure providers, Melbourne Airport, industrial and residential developments, and renewable energy projects. There's a strong understanding of heritage legislation in Victoria, New South Wales, the ACT, and under the Commonwealth. He has developed a collaborative working relationships with registered Aboriginal parties and traditional owners across these jurisdictions. And I know that it's a particularly topical topic. I don't know if that's the correct saying, but in our industry at the moment. So that'll be a great presentation. And then we have Lisette, who will be our second speaker, a strategic urban designer with a proven ability to translate vision into deliverable outcomes. She drives value by integrating design with planning, engineering, and infrastructure to optimize yields and reduce costs. And a collaborative outcome-focused approach ensures projects exceed expectations from concept through delivery. And now she's heading up the Victorian urban development team at Colliers. So I won't hold everyone too much longer, but what I will do is I will use this opportunity to shamelessly market the in-person event. You might have seen my email and then my apologies email for getting the day wrong on the event that came out 2 or 3 days ago. It should be a really fun night, and I think it'll be a great way to kind of wrap up the tech month in I guess a different setting to these webinars, but it'll be a great opportunity to kind of hear from some leaders within our industry, and then also kind of network with our fellow peers, and kind of just, I guess, meet up and collaborate and network with each other after what has been a pretty intense month for YEiLD putting these sessions together. So I do encourage everyone to RSV as soon as you can to that event, because it is in only 2 weeks, just around the corner. So they're pushing for numbers soon. So the quicker you can RSVP and get numbers along, the better. It's at the Sporting Globe in Richmond. If you haven't seen it, on a Thursday night at 6 p.m, an hour of panel discussion about career shaping, followed by plenty of food, plenty of drinks, virtual darts we get, which I don't know how that kind of works, but that could be fun. And then the footy will be on as well, so should be a good night. I can confirm that the panelists for the session will be Jamie Tainton, Anthony Grodsky, Harrison Sperling, and Rod Jackson, and we're still waiting maybe on one more person. So if there is that last person, she's just started a new role at Yarra Valley Water, so we're just trying to figure out if she can join. So I'll keep you all updated. But without further ado, enough of me. I think I'll hand over to Ashley. So Ashley, up to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kieran. All right, I will share this screen and then theoretically that will work. Cool. Okay, I think everyone should be able to see that now.
Gotcha.
Great. I'm just going to start my timer while I'm thinking about that as well. Cool. Okay. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to spend a lot of my presentation today focusing on Aboriginal heritage, in particular the tangible side of Aboriginal heritage management. And hopefully over the next 20 or so minutes, you can take away one thing that will make your life a little bit easier in this. Yeah, as Kieran said, it's very topical at the moment and an ever-evolving space. Just want to echo the acknowledgement. I'm actually up in Sydney at the moment, so I'm presenting on the land of the Gadigal people, the Eora Nation. I live on Wurundjeri country and I work on Bunurong country. So obviously echo that sentiment from earlier. Bit of an overview of the things I'll talk about today. So I'll go very briefly into, I guess, the Aboriginal Heritage Act and the regulations, kind of the whole way in which a CHMP is required, how that all goes about. I'll talk a little bit about what's involved in preparation of a CHMP, what we're looking for, why we're looking for it, that kind of thing. And then hopefully at the end, we can get a bit of a session on how you can plan for impacts to developments or construction programs during the CHMP process, which I know obviously is a thing we work mostly with our engineer and client partners. Some of the things that I've shown in my presentations today aren't publicly available. So obviously please use discretion with some of the information that I've shared. It's just the known location of Aboriginal places, which is something that I can access and you guys actually can't. Similar. There's a bit of background about me. Obviously I have my degree. I've worked for over 10 years now. Watch a lot of sport, and I like telling everyone that I have a low handicap at golf. So now you all know too. Cool. Okay. This is a whole swathe of different pieces of legislation that we use to think about the management of Aboriginal heritage. Obviously, the two primary ones are the Aboriginal Heritage Act and the regulations. But there are also other bits of legislation that we use throughout our process. The Heritage Act, which broadly manages things of state significance, primarily European, also has quite a significant amount of Aboriginal cultural heritage listed. One example of such is the Queen Vic markets. Obviously, the Planning and Environment Act has a whole swathe of things that considers Aboriginal heritage. And then there are Commonwealth pieces of legislation and guidelines as well. I've included the Borough Charter there, which is one of the main things that we use to define how we assess significance of places across Australia. So when you've ever seen like a various scientific or cultural significance assessment or rating, that's normally driven by the Borough Charter. But yeah, the two things we really think about obviously quite rigorously are the Act and the regulations. As you guys would likely know, we primarily deal with registered Aboriginal parties who are the regulator under the Aboriginal Heritage Act for their particular jurisdiction. This is the current map of all the registered Aboriginal parties across Victoria. What you'll see is that there are some areas within Victoria where a registered Aboriginal party has not been appointed. In those particular areas, we work with traditional owner organisations, and the state body, First People State Relations, are the regulator in that instance. Victorian government's goal is to try and obviously have 100% of these areas managed by a registered Aboriginal party, but it is tricky for some of the contested areas that are in sort of more regional Victoria, and also there are a lot of administrative and managing country responsibilities for registered Aboriginal parties that some organisations just don't have the kind of admin power behind them to deliver on. So, but we have a lot of the state which is within a RAP boundary, which is great. And yeah, Victoria is the only state where the management of cultural heritage is given to traditional owners, which is, I think, is obviously a great thing for us. So CHMPs, from a regulatory perspective, the one that you will primarily work with is a mandatory CHMP, which is triggered under section 46(1)(a) of the Act. It involves a couple of things. The works area having an area of cultural heritage sensitivity, which I'll talk more about later. The proposed works being high impact. Those two things combined is a mandatory CHMP. Other less common triggers for what is more of a mandatory assessment I've listed there. If you're working on a project that requires an EES, a CHMP is always required. Very occasionally, the minister will direct someone to prepare a plan. There's only a few instances of that across the last 20 or so years. And one that you may come across, which I haven't listed here, is a plan under section 45, which is a voluntary CHMP, which a sponsor may elect to pursue. But for the most part, section 46 mandatory plans are what we deal with, and you guys will deal with as well. So areas of CHS, they're the big green boxes that you'll see on VicPlan quite regularly. There's a whole swathe of things that they're tied to. The primary one being 200 meters of waterways or 50 meters of a known Aboriginal place, and then a whole bunch of other things. So all of the land within 200 meters of the coast is an area of CHS, national parks, the high plains, all of the alpine resorts are all areas of CHS, sand sheets, volcanic cones, the works. So there is a whole variety of areas of CHS, which are those green blobs. The one thing that I tell almost all of our clients is that these buffers are not archaeological potential. They are just statutory buffers that define one half of the two-part trigger for a mandatory CHMP. They're guided by a whole bunch of other things. So this is kind of an example. So this is an area of CHS for the north of Melbourne, sort of around Beveridge, Mariang, and Calcalo at the very southern extent. You can see obviously quite a number of major waterways. You've got Merry Creek in the middle, Calcalo Creek on the western side, and there's those 200-meter buffers off those creek lines. There's a big volcanic cone here in the middle, which is Mount Fraser, a big volcano that you will drive past on the Hume every time you go north and south coming back. And then there's a whole bunch of other things too. But what you can see through the middle here is there's this really quite significant amount of like a big waterway that's not an area of CHS. The reason for that, and all of these other mapped waterways, is that these waterways don't have a name. So only waterways that are named under the Water Act get statutory buffers. But what you can see from my next slide is that these now are all where previously recorded Aboriginal places have been found in this area. This map's about a year old, which I'll talk to you a little bit later on. You can see here, this waterway, while not being an area of CHS, has quite a number of Aboriginal places recorded along it and all around it. And I know from doing work along this particular little tributary that it holds a fair bit of water. So it would have been a good place for people to procure resources, which is why all this material is here. There's a couple of different things going on here too. So this is the one that you guys can see. That's the one I can see. These sort of triangle dot things, they are artifact scatters. The little brown areas that are quite significant, they're the extent of an artifact scatter. I'll come back to them later. Cool. I won't go through this one too hard, but the regulations also talk about what's a high impact activity. They're closely tied to the VPP. A particular version of the VPP from 2018, I will add as well. But most commonly, subdivision of land, Regulation 49 is one that we deal with quite regularly. It's 3 lots or more, and one lot has to be less than 8 hectares, so pretty common trigger. I won't go into SGD too hard, but that's one that is worth looking into further. There's a couple of important VCAT cases that have defined what significant ground disturbance is. So a quite important thing that we deal with regularly and worth familiarizing yourself, I guess, after this if you don't already. Cool. So we kind of go through the regs, decide if a plan's required or not. If one is, then we prepare it. It kind of looks like this. So there's the 3 different primary stages involved. These are all undertaken in direct consultation with the registered Aboriginal party, or the traditional owner groups. There's a desktop standard and complex assessment. When they developed the Act, they thought of these great names for these 3 stages, but basically it's background research. Standard assessment is pedestrian survey, or sometimes vehicle survey, or a bit of both. And then complex assessment is our subsurface investigation. Most of the work that we will do on sites is primarily tied to that 3rd step, complex assessment. It is the most kind of rigorous part. Once we've kind of gone through and done all that, we'll have the findings of our results. We'll then be able to do an impact assessment to determine whether or not there's going to be harm to either known or potential areas where Aboriginal cultural heritage is present. That's considered under a particular section of the Act, section 61. And then once we've done that impact assessment, we will consult with the TOs or the RAP or FBSR and agree on management conditions for the CHMP, which are typically per Aboriginal place in the plan, as well as a bunch of other standard ones that are present in most CHMPs, such as inductions and inspections, which I'm sure you've all come across before. Some examples of some complex assessment. So highly varying in nature, depends on what we're doing, where we're doing it. So the primary thing we will do is 1 by 1 meter test pits. We're required by the guidelines to do 1 of those per landform. That's the one on the right, which I dug myself. And then we do some other things too. So the one in the middle is a 5 by 1 meter mechanical trench, which we did across the volcanic plain on a site in Beveridge. And then the area on the left is a larger expanded pit that we excavated on top of a stony rise in Donnybrook. These are all kind of examples of different forms of complex assessment. The key thing being that each of these methods were discussed and approved with the registered Aboriginal party that we were working with. And yeah, ultimately they decide kind of what they want to see, and we'll present some justification as to why or why not. That's the most suitable approach. But it is the RAP that determines kind of what we do and how we do it for the most part. Cool. At the end of the day, all of that work is looking for particular things. So we're looking for various types of Aboriginal places, which will be found at different parts of the project. The most common is artifact scatters, or what's called a low density artifact distribution, which is another great technical term that I hate. It's 10 artifacts or less within a 10 by 10 meter area. I don't know who thought of that, but they've made my life very challenging sometimes. They're the most common, represent about 98% of the Aboriginal places recorded in Victoria. It's just, it's evidence of occupation of the landscape for tens of thousands of years plus. So there's a lot of artifacts over that period and a lot of them present in the landscape. The other places, for the most part, are much rarer and typically environment bound. So, for example, scarred trees are really just prevalent where there is mature or remnant vegetation. If we find stuff like ground edge or flaked edge axes, those are quite rare. That's an example of one that was found. Well, it's from a stone procurement site in Mount William. Those scarred trees are from a site near Bendigo and Jarrah country. And then middens are typically constrained to coastal or lagoon environments. And then hearths, which is an example of one on the right there, are particularly rare. And they're just like ground ovens, essentially. If we find hearths, they are particularly significant and get their own lens of importance. But yeah, they're very uncommon. Like I said, stone artifacts is the main one, which is why if you've done a cultural heritage induction before, the primary focus of that induction will be about the identification of stone material during the works, which is what may happen. Cool. I guess that kind of talks to the process that we go through and why we get to what we get to. I've got about 5 minutes to kind of talk through, what we're seeing in Victoria and how we can work with you guys. There's been quite a big change in our industry in the last 3 to 5 years. I think the COVID period in particular had a big shift in that in terms of the increase in infrastructure projects, which I'm sure, if you've been working in the industry long enough, you would have seen that as well. There's been a really big shift towards harm avoidance, which if I refer back to that particular section of the Act, section 61, it asks us 3 key questions, which is, can you avoid harm? If the answer is no, can you minimize harm? The answer is then no, what management measures are required? Previously, and then earlier in my career, we would just go straight to question 3 and propose management measures, such as salvage or things of that nature. Most of the traditional owner and RAP organizations now really want us to strongly consider harm avoidance and will challenge you to consider that as well. And will often ask you to demonstrate why you cannot avoid harm as much as why you should. To tie into that, there has been quite a big shift in terms of what's required from a management perspective. A lot of the Metro Melbourne groups in particular now will expect that if you're going to impact an Aboriginal place, that you will salvage 100% of that place, regardless of the size and scale of that Aboriginal recording. So, for example, we see sometimes places that are 2,000 plus square meters require 100% management, which is excavation in an archaeological method, which is slow. Another big one that's been on the radar for a little while, but certainly more important now, is stony rises, which the Northern Growth Corridor of Melbourne is primarily that landscape. They are considered highly significant to Wurundjeri people in particular, but also that you have those similar landforms in Wadawurrung, sort of further west, and in Eastern Mara and Goodnish Mara country. Again, those places are considered quite significant from a cultural values perspective, which I haven't touched on too much in this presentation, but another factor to think about. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about that example I gave before, where I said that areas of CHS are not archaeological potential. You can kind of see those little light patches that are all across this aerial. So the site that I'm familiar with in Beveridge, all of those little light patches are all stony rises. We investigated all of those areas quite intensively, and we actually did quite limited investigation near where the areas of CHS are, because it's near the waterway. So that was sort of the pre-site for a linear corridor that kind of runs north and then east-west. This was the result. So you can see we actually found quite a significant amount of material distributed across the site, and we've recorded all of these new places, none of which are, actually, sorry, only 2 of them are located within a previously recorded area of cultural heritage sensitivity. So all of these places at some point will get their own 50-meter buffer. But something really interesting for you guys to think about is that these buffers really are just arbitrary or statutory requirements. They don't actually tell us where things will be and won't be. They just tell us if a CHMP is required or not. What can you do? I think the important one is to think about cultural heritage a lot earlier than the industry has done, and something that I know industry has gotten a lot better at because of the time and cost challenges of delivering a CHMP. Getting in there and having a think, or getting a heritage consultant to have a think about where things may or may not be across a site is really important early on to understand any limitations around sort of cut and fill plans. You know, give your consultant really simple stuff too. You know, I see a lot of engineering design plans. I have an arts degree, not the best at reading them, but a cut and fill plan is great for us because it's really simple, tells us where the impacts will be. That's what I'm looking for. One thing that I talk to my consultants quite a bit about is what we consider excavation versus what maybe a project will consider excavation. To me, the material that I'm looking for is all in the topsoil. It's all in that first few hundred mil typically. Once you're getting down a couple of meters deep, that's well earlier than human history. So the top stuff is what I care about, which is, you know, when it comes to things like surface prep for filling, that kind of activity actually has a significant impact on Aboriginal cultural heritage when compared to what it might be from like a ground surface stripping perspective. A few other things there as well. One thing that I've been pretty strong on with a lot of our clients lately is to be really transparent with the traditional owners and registered Aboriginal parties about what is actually achievable, and what you can and can't do, and the realities of your project. They want to know about sort of thing more than ever. And if you're being open with them, chances are, and my experience is, they'll be open in return and talk a lot about what their needs and interests are. The very last one I've put there is about Aboriginal place registrations. Our industry is not great at doing that extra little 5% to make your life a bit easier at the end of the project. It really challenged them to make these things a little smaller because we just sort of start recording whatever we feel like, which can have quite significant implications for your project. I'll whip through this one because I'm nearly done. Our industry is really quite new still. The Aboriginal Heritage Act is from 2006. It really only has formalized in the last 5 to 10 years properly, is my kind of view. We've put a lot of people who aren't ready in positions that we shouldn't have. And there's been some challenges in CHMP processes as a result of that, which I'm sure you probably will encounter in your career at some point. We're really bad at reading engineering plans, so simple is good. And then I think the one thing we need to get better at as an industry is to learn about the cost implications of what the work is that we do. You know, I think we have a feel for the time implications, but we don't understand holistically how long a CHMP takes and what that means for product delivery and the increasing costs that your product will burden as a result. So something for our industry to think about. That's it from me. CHMPs are hard. They're hard for me. I do this 5 days a week, so they'll be hard for you too. Just work with your consultant, be transparent, and look, they're not going to get simpler or easier, is my view. But maybe if you have a better understanding of what it is that we do, that might make your life a little bit easier as well. Cool. That's it from me. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ashley. Plenty of questions coming through the chat. And once again, same as last week, we will save them all until the end. For now, we'll just get cracking on. So Lisette, up to you.
Can you see that?
Not yet. There we go. Gotcha.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisette. I'm the Associate Director of Urban Design at Colliers. And today I'll just give you a quick overview, not too much depth about what urban design is, but I sort of thought I'd focus on a few different engineering disciplines and how urban design can work together with them at the beginning of a project to have a better outcome at the end. So what is urban design? It's the process of sort of shaping the physical features of a place, and it involves creating well-designed, functional and aesthetic pleasing urban environments. And it's a multidisciplinary approach. So urban design draws upon all the different various fields that we all work with in the industry, like architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, civil, water, traffic, and we use all their expertise and integrate them to address the complexities of a project. So what is good urban design? Gives value to the community. So it creates inclusive and connected, accessible communities, provides amenity for everyone, respects local character and context, improves safety and perception, boosts civic pride, supports energy efficiency and low carbon development, and it can revitalise heritage and cultural stories. And why is it good for our clients? Because it increases rental returns and capital growth. Their developments stand out from the competition. They meet market demands, try and lower maintenance, energy and security costs. It also enables mixed-use developments, raises prestige of the area, gives investor confidence, and also avoids costly fixes later on in the project. So urban design times civil engineering. How can we collaborate better to get better outcomes? So the urban designer's role is to create walkable, engaging layout with hierarchy of streets, create the neighbourhood structure. The civil engineer delivers the road grades, the intersections, the services that align with our layouts. And you want to minimise earthworks and maximise safety and constructability. So working together, we get neighbourhoods that function smoothly, they're cost effective to build, and they're pleasant to navigate. If we work well together at the beginning, we can reduce cost blowouts and redesign during the detailed design phase. We can improve staging and delivery across large projects. We can unlock more developable land by smartly managing the constraints of the site. And we also build trust with authorities and council through integrated deliverable outcomes. So this is an example at South Jerrabomberra. The urban designers might propose ambitious ideas, but the civil engineers have to evaluate them and make them practical and affordable. Working hand in hand with the civil team on this project, the urban design were able to provide an innovative layout that addressed the slope. It's in the ACT and it's really, really steep, this site. We were able to put together a vision for the site that looked at the roads and then address that with the engineers through an iterative process on retaining strategies, servicing costs, drainage, and how we're going to get all the services in there. But by working together at the beginning, we were really able to test some of these things before going right down to the master planning process. So we got a really good design in the end. We got smart staging. We didn't have to do too much rework because the design was done collaboratively at the beginning of the project, and it had better financial outcomes for the developer. So now I'll look at urban design and stormwater and flooding. Urban design and stormwater engineers work hand in hand to shape places that are not only livable and beautiful, but they're also resilient and sustainable. When we work together from the outset, I think communities have really, really improved. We get socially, environmentally, and economically, we get better outcomes. So when we collaborate early, we can co-locate infrastructure. We can get flexibility in staging, and then we can get more attractive, higher value precincts that align with the design goals about connecting the community to the environment. So this is Woodsong, and you can see on the left up the top, that was the original DSS. The water engineers were able to produce a stormwater management strategy that significantly enhanced the developable area. They negotiated with Melbourne Water and the Hume City Council to create a constructible and cost-effective asset. This increased the developable land by about 40 lots and also opened up more of the waterway to have frontage where the urban designers then can design the master plan to really take advantage of the asset. The reconfigured strategy also allowed for a quick resolution for a major CHMP issue, and it avoided $8 million and 5 years of salvage. So that was a really great outcome with lots of disciplines working together. So I'll go to the next one. So next I've got traffic. So urban design and traffic and transport engineers have to work hand in hand to shape the communities that are safe, accessible and people focused. But we still need to make sure that cars and efficient movement of goods and services can still happen. But when we do work together at the beginning and collaborate, we can create great places that are vibrant and functional and equitable and are not dominated by cars, but are actually built around people. So if we work together early in the beginning, we get better integration of land use and transport planning, streets that perform or support both the place and the performance. You get improved public and active transport uptake, fewer retrofits and safety upgrades down the track, and you get good support from council and agencies. So this project is in Concordia in South Australia. The original collaboration between the traffic engineers and the urban designers was to avoid an arterial road through this growth area. As you know, arterial roads really put a barrier between precincts. This was done pretty much by doing a rough calculation. So there were 12,000 dwellings, 8 vehicle movements a day, add a couple of extra for going to school and that kind of stuff, and be able to come up with sort of a solution that didn't require a big arterial road through the site. Then the internal road was fleshed out using existing rural road reservations and appropriate local intersection spacing, trying to emphasize that trying not to emphasize a north-south route because they wanted the external traffic to take a perimeter road and not just be running through the growth area. And the collaboration worked, and they're able to get a really good solution. I'm not sure if there are any electrical engineers in the room, but I thought I'd add that in as well. I don't know too much about the project that I'll show later, but I thought it was pretty cool. So when we get collaboration early, we can have energy demand built into and planned into stages. We can embed it in the urban fabric and not retrofit it later on. We can look at greater efficiency of power usage, lighting and maintenance. It increases community resilience and sustainability and avoid conflicts between electrical infrastructure and other items. So this one is the Tonsley Innovation District. And it's an example of urban regeneration where the urban designers and electrical engineers collaborated to deliver a smart, sustainable and integrated precinct. It's 61 hectares and it's the old Mitsubishi site, manufacturing site. And so they've turned it into an innovation hub with residential, retail, education and commercial. What was interesting though is that they've put a smart grid and a microgrid into here. So they've got rooftop solar PVs delivering over 3.6 megawatts of renewable energy. They're able to retain some of these existing structures through the urban design, and they've repurposed them and they've put extensive solar generation on the roof. So it's sort of providing a public public realm. Yeah, really nice public realm as part of the sort of oh, sorry, I've lost my thought. And the roof space now is used to provide shade, and it's also reducing the heat urban island effect and energy demand. So in this one, the cross collaboration resulted in infrastructure that supports economic development, environmental performance and social equity. So enabled sustainable energy use, flexible infrastructure and enhanced quality of life. So just a few takeaways is that the urban designer sets the vision and the civil engineer makes it real. The stormwater and flooding engineer enables the function while the urban designer enhances the form and experience. The urban designer shapes the why and the where, and the transport engineer delivers the how and how safely. And urban design ensures communities are people-focused, and electrical engineering ensures they are powered, safe, and smart. And that's it.
Well, great. Thanks, Lisette. I think that last slide there all kind of sums it up really well in a sense of, yeah, it's a good little 1-2 punch combo of if this goes right, then this goes right, and et cetera, and how we can all kind of benefit each other in this big dance that is land development. I'll get straight on to questions. And again, same as last week, we're probably going to run over the 2:45 kind of soft limit that we've got. But again, there are some great questions in here, and I think some really valuable information that could come out of this. So I'm just going to get cracking on them, and you're more than welcome to stay. But if you've got other things to go to, that's understood. Ashley's had a bit of time to read some of these questions that have come through. So I will start with Ashley, and then we'll move over to Lisette. Wesley's asked 3 back-to-back questions, which is great. You know what? You can choose which one you want to answer, and you can go with that if you've 1 or 2, or it's up to you.
Yeah, I can answer kind of all 3 pretty easily.
Perfect.
So I'll do it all.
Yep.
A complex assessment is triggered when the activity has the potential to harm cultural heritage, or we can't demonstrate that it won't harm cultural heritage. There's some particular wording in the regulations that define that, but ultimately, if you're in a greenfields area, more often than not, you'll be doing a complex assessment. And on the very rare occasion that it's a standard assessment only, that's because it's either a highly disturbed landscape or the activity will be delivered in such a way that there won't be harm to cultural heritage because it's pretty small scale. But yeah, we did quite a lot, so it's pretty hard to demonstrate that particular regulation, and it's not being required. Scarred trees, almost always, they will not be able to be harmed, is the simple answer. On very limited instances, there is CHMPs that permit harm to a scarred tree. That's typically because the tree is dead. So the scar is still there, but the tree's health is so poor that retaining it in situ is not really achievable or a good outcome. In that case, actually what will happen is there will be conservation efforts done for that tree, and it will be relocated or put into some sort of display, which I've seen previously, and we're working on a project of that nature at the moment. The answer to the Stony Rise question is very challenging at the moment. Where possible, retention of them is an excellent outcome from a time and cost perspective as much as anything, and also from a cultural heritage recognition perspective. What I can also tell you is the Stony Rise piece is often quite closely aligned with the PSP objectives and goals. And a lot of the councils in the Northern Growth Corridor area in particular have specific interest in retention of those landforms and see value in them forming part of sort of like, future urban space or being important landscape features. So most regulators would prefer you avoid them. If you need to harm them, then the expectation is that it will be a pretty rigorous process in which to do so.
Yeah, no, that's understood. Thank you for that. We'll move over. A question for you now, Lisette. From Lillian, how has the introduction of smaller lots and therefore the small lot housing code restraints affected urban design layouts?
Well, I think the small lot housing code has allowed for more flexibility in trying to get small lots into the urban development. The real issue that I think people are finding now is that you don't want to have narrow lots because with all the servicing issues, we're not getting any street trees with all separation. So it's kind of one of those ones where the rear lane works really well because you can have services in there and no crossovers, and you stop all that conflict. But with the widths that councils are requiring now, having a road and a rear lane doesn't kind of make a difference, especially when you've got both. So I think that sort of the next stage of that smaller lot or more density is going to be really interesting. I've been talking to a few builders recently about what the next step is. Places like Melton East, where they've got average of 30 plus lots a hectare that they require, you're going to have some apartments, or what that next kind of phase of housing is going to be, because you can't get that within, you know, even a townhouse kind of development. You won't see those kinds of densities, and especially across a vast space like that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Are you thinking that the I guess council's requirements of street trees is kind of pulling a bit of a handbrake on how much we can kind of really do with those medium density lots?
Yeah, but I reckon even like this, like I'm sure a lot of people have seen about like trying to get services under roads, sharing areas, rather than just having them all underneath the footpath and the verge, and trying to look at some more interesting ways of how we can have everything under the ground, so on top of the ground where people live, is much nicer. But everyone wants their own little bit to have their own asset in. So
yeah, that's it. We'll flick back to Ashley. I think there's kind of two questions we can almost kind of grind into one here between Dean and Wes again, just about the emerging technologies, and if there's anything you kind of see coming out in the future that's going to help you, I know, fast track a lot of these processes or anything.
We're really backwards in archaeology. So the simple answer is there are technologies that may assist, but we are really bad at using them. I think we're really trying to move to these kind of more holistic landscape-based assessments. And we have so much information about where Aboriginal places are and are not now that predictive modeling is really valuable. And we do a lot of work with, like, you know, obviously like things like LiDAR and trying to map like rises and falls in the landscape to get a feeling for where those points of elevation are. Probably the one thing that we haven't gotten great at is trusting that information. So we will still go out and ground truth all of that through that testing process I described earlier. I remain optimistic that at some point we will get a little better at just trusting the results of that and saying, well, it's highly likely stuff will be there and we can manage it accordingly. But the one thing we can't get out of that process is whether or not what's there is significant or not, and defining what it is. So I still think there will be a role for how we do things currently. I just think that we can and should get better at it, but, you know, maybe not immediately.
Yeah, it's a product of, I guess, kind of shaking loose the kind of old ways of doing things and trying to find new ways of doing it and getting people on board with that.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll jump back to Lisette now. Question from Chloe, your teammate. Have you noticed if urban resilience is reshaping urban design?
Yeah, it is. It's not being necessarily driven by like councils or government agencies, but I think the bigger developers are realizing that's important to the future purchaser, and that having sustainable developments and making sure that you're looking after the climate through the development of these, it's important to the purchaser. So it does cost more money though, and so whether the developer is prepared to invest in that, people with larger brands will. And it's also very simple to a lot of it can be done with road layouts, making sure that lots are getting the right amount of sun in them at the right time of day, which you would hope an urban designer is looking at already. And then, you know, just starting off with that kind of thing, and then you can build upon it after that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Josh has asked two questions here. I think you can probably answer both, Ash. That hopefully maybe the first question is more of could just be a pretty strict no, but I'm sure you can answer. So you mentioned the full salvage of site extents have been asked for recently, and the time and cost impacts that this can have. Is there any way to challenge a request of an elder group? And then the second question is, how does the CHM process and elders view existing assets and reserves? And then he gives an example there.
The first one is you can challenge a regulator. That's no different to every other regulator. You can ask the questions as to why they've directed you to do a particular thing. What I would say is that the success points that we've had in that is when that particular sponsor has been really willing to work with the regulator to get some other good outcomes around harm avoidance or really clearly articulating what's achievable and what isn't. I think if you're doing those things combined with asking those harder questions, there's always a chance. It's not necessarily a no, but it's often not a yes either, sadly. So we just kind of deal with what we get and we make it work where possible, which is why harm avoidance is so critical for us now. Second question, another great one related to, I guess, like, you know, you're augmenting a road or putting in new lights, and that then sort of lives as part of a CHMP when, you know, Vic Roads can come along and maintain the road whenever they want. There's two reasons for that. You referred to the maintenance things. The Aboriginal Homes regulations also have some very particular things that are considered maintenance, that it sort of refers to as other acts. So they can sort of do whatever they want there within reason. There is a particular regulation that requires us to consider activity holistically. So it's all a part of an activity is the wording that the regulations use. So we think about, you know, at the end of the day, is that road upgrade required if this subdivision does not occur? If the answer is yes, then potentially you can do it without the requirement to include it within the CHMP. But more often than not, that answer is no. Similarly, when it comes to, you know, new assets and, you know, new sewer, new power, new, you know, fiber optic cable, the works, right? So if those things are sort of only driven by the requirement for the subdivision, then most often they will need to be included as part of the CHMP. It will certainly limit the amount of investigation that's required for those things, because, you know, putting a test pit in under a road is 98% of the time not really a thing that we do. Sometimes we do in particular landscapes where it's very deep soils, but it's just one of those things that the regulations ask us to consider it, so we kind of have to.
That's great. I think we might leave it there. I think there's plenty of information there, and if you have any more questions, feel free to kind of reach out to anyone. I don't know how willing Ash and Lisette will be to give their time outside of this, but yeah, I would definitely like to say thank you to both Ashley and Lisette for your presentations. Yeah, both were exactly what these kind of webinars are all about, in a sense that we're all just trying to get better as engineers starting out our careers, and how we can all work together to ultimately create a better outcome. So I definitely really appreciate your time, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. Be sure to RSVP for the in-person event as soon as you can. Come along. Tickets are dirt cheap, so just tap someone on the shoulder and see how many people you can get around, because it should be a fun night. And then outside of that, we go again for another webinar next week with Maywan from Plan B and Matt Bradbury, who's going to be talking a bit about landscape architecture. So should be another good session. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
See you all later.